In the world of training, lesson plans have perhaps some of the most variations that you will ever find. So while my goal is not to describe all the templates or structures of lesson plans, my goal in this session is rather to give you a basic lesson plan template and talk through the major components of this lesson plan, in the hope that you will take these components and apply them to the lessons that you will be conducting and the training that you will be conducting. And so this lesson plan is not the gospel, rather, it's a good opportunity to look at what components does a good lesson plan have. Okay, let's begin. Number one, all training sessions should have a title. And this can become tricky because often facilitators will, over time, have a variety of trainings that they've already done. And when they meet clients, they often just reproduce the trainings. And this is sometimes captured in the title. So they'll just tweak the title, but the content doesn't necessarily meet the needs of the client, right? Or the organization. And so the title should always be centered around the problem that is to be resolved or the results that are trying to be achieved. And that also relates to the actual training itself. There's no point in bringing a square peg to a round hole or trying to solve a problem that the organization has not expressed is an actual challenge. Date and time, as per usual, and then the objectives. A key thing about the objectives, when you're thinking about them and you're laying them out, is for them to be very, very specific. And one of the things I'll talk about in a second, let's step back for a moment. I'm actually going to talk a little bit about objectives. And we looked at designing our curriculum, but the one element I want to talk about is 4 factors that make a strong objective. The first one is an action verb, right? So it focuses on the results of the training or the results, and this is tied to the problem, right? So there's a problem and then there's a solution, and in the middle is an action verb. We then say conditions, so students will be able to X after or following a review, or given this they'll be able to demonstrate. We then include some standards or criteria, and then we have our audience, right? So let's look at an example. After completing this course, you should be able to list at least 3 common data sources used to characterize health or disease status of a community. Let's look at how these 4 criteria fit in here. We have our action verb right over here, to list. Our audience, in this case you could perhaps have more descriptive terms, right? Then we say at least 3 common data sources. So this is where the standards or criteria come in, and the conditions, right? This is where the conditions come in after attending the lecture. So we could say, used to characterize health or disease status of a community. So these 4 factors, and I advise you to write them down, and I will actually just keep this example on the page for you to use to think about as you craft your own objectives. So let us go back to our lesson plan, and that's where the objectives will be able to, and they've already given you an audience, so this might help you already, okay? And it also asks you to outline how you're going to assess this. That's a really critical piece. Often facilitators will tell me that was a great session, and then when I ask to see their evaluation plan, there is none. You have to have an evaluation plan. You have to have a way of knowing whether people have achieved the results that you set out. Then list the materials. What is it that you're going to need to use? These could be handouts, these could be technological resources, these could even be speakers or actual persons who could come in and conduct specific evaluative or input. For example, if you're doing a training session on statistics, it might be useful to have someone come in from Salesforce, for example, for a few minutes and share their experience as part of an overall learning or lesson. Now, each piece of a lesson plan is very, very structured, okay? And remember, teaching is organized and systematic learning, right? So you have to organize it, but it has to be systematized at the same time. It has to be logical. It has to make sense. And remember, we use the term scaffolding. It has to build on previous knowledge. So when we talk about instructional techniques, we think about what we call delivery methods, all right? Where students can be experiencing, applying, thinking, and reflecting. So you've got to think about your delivery methods and as how they apply, or your instructional technique that can take someone from remembering to actually creating. And as you go through this lesson plan, you can flesh this out, and by the end, you will have a lesson plan that starts by building on the previous lesson and ends by setting up the next lesson. And that fits into the overall structure of what a lesson plan should have. And this is a great starting point for anyone who is trying to design their own training sessions.